Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Buckets podcast. I'm your host once again, Jacob. We're week 8 is in the books. We're in week 9 now. So this is gonna be a short recap of week 8. Great week as always. Some fun basketball. Rockets have been fun to watch. The game against Minnesota on Saturday was crazy. They made a crazy comeback and I had some friends over. We were sitting here in the living room watching that game, and man, it was an exciting game. It was awesome the way they came back in the fourth and shocked Minnesota, and Minnesota looked discombobulated and didn't know what to do. Or it was just, it's cool, man. It's cool how the Rockets offense flows, and they can hit 3 threes back to back, and you just see how that brings the opposing team's confidence, just brings them down, you know. And it's even happened with good teams where that confidence just drops, where you know you put up those kind of points in such a short amount of time, and it just sucks the life out of the opposing team. And you know, Minnesota still fought back in the overtime, but overall, man, the Rockets, they just came together and they got hot at the right time and just in time to be able to steal that game. That was an exciting game. Beverly is still, making a huge impact on the defensive end, and just his energy on the team is great. So, yeah, man, Rockets been balling. I'm happy about the Rockets. Clint Capella's hurt. You know, he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. That hurt me and my fantasy team because he was one of my he wasn't my top big. I would say Anthony Davis is my top big, and then Dwight Howard following him. But Capella was definitely like my third top big, and it was very valuable to my team. He was a permanent roster type of player, but he's out for 6 to 8 weeks, and man, I had to drop him. And you know, that's the thing about fantasy, man. You can't get attached to players, and you got to know which players to drop and which ones not to drop. That's why I try to include this drop 'em segment that I've been doing. Mike Conley came back. I didn't really include Mike Conley in the in either of the 3 segments that I do for these videos. Just because Mike Conley should have been held on to, and his ownership was still around the 80% tile, so he was still pretty well owned, and I think it was a no-brainer for folks to hold on to him. But if you're in that 20% of leagues that the owners let him go, by all means scoop him up, because he can be a top 10 point guard as far as fantasy goes, and he came back, and he came back quicker than anticipated. Was supposed to come back in January, but came back this last week. So, man, that guy's got some Wolverine blood in him, because he heals quickly, and his back is doing all right. So if you're Mike Conley owner and you dropped him, you made a mistake. That's pretty much a huge mistake if you did that. But I didn't, like I said, I didn't include him because he's 80% owned. So yeah, good week of basketball. We're in week 9 now. Got some Adam players who are low key balling. Got some players to watch for. And I got a drop-in player. Somebody needs to be dropped. So without further ado, let's get this thing started. First player for the Adam segment that I'm going to be speaking about is Gary Harris, shooting guard for the Denver Nuggets. Gary Harris was hurt. He came back, And since he came back briefly, played some time, then he got re-injured again and missed some more extensive games and more extensive time. But he came back, and since he's been back, he's been balling. He came right into Denver's offense and started producing. And he's not just an offensive player, man. He can play defense. So he's only in his third year, but last year he kind of established himself as one of the better perimeter defenders on the Denver team. And Denver is the fifth worst defense in the league right now. So him being back, him providing some young legs, and since he's been back, he seems like he hadn't missed a beat. He didn't come back on a minutes restriction. He just came back full-fledged into the game and has been balling. He's been low-key balling. Low-key for now because a lot of people don't know about him, but I'm sure, his ownership percentage will definitely increase over the next couple of weeks. Since he's been back, he's averaged 22.3 fantasy points over his last 3 games. And I myself scooped him up in our league of record just because I was kind of high on him in the beginning of the year and thought that he could do well, thought that he had a lot of potential. He showed some flashes last year towards the end of being a solid fantasy player. And just as players develop and they stay in the league longer, they start to build that confidence of what they can do. But yeah, so 22.3 fantasy points over the last 3 games. He's averaged 19.3 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.6 steals, and 32 minutes over the last 3 games. So he's came back just full throttle, just like he hadn't missed a beat, and it's great. He's definitely someone to pick up. He could definitely. He's not just a guy to pick up as a waiver wire ad. I could see him having long-term value towards the end of the season. Denver is 7th in the NBA in points per game, so he can get you those other stats, those defensive stats. But they score as bad as their defense is. They do score a lot of points. They're top 7 in the NBA in points per game. So Denver players have an opportunity to get offensive buckets. What they need work on is their defense. And Gary Harris comes back and is one of their better perimeter defenders. So that should even garner more minutes for him in the rotation if the coaches are smart. He's currently only 34.8% owned. Him and Moutier got like a real, they got a bromance going on, I guess you could say. I don't know, maybe not a bromance, but they're buddies. They like each other, and Moutier was feeling down. He's glad he's back, and so I'm sure Moutier is not gonna have any reluctance to look for him on the offensive end. So that just helps his case a little bit. Although Moutier has been very inconsistent as far as his production, but the fact that the point guard is buddies with the guy, he's gonna look for him, and that's definitely not something that he'll shy away from. So that just helps the case a tad bit. But overall, he doesn't really need that. He's a solid player in his own right. And scoop up Gary Harris, man. I think he's a good look. I think he's a really good look. Next guy on the list, if you need some point guard help, scoop up the forgotten Ricky Rubio. And I say forgotten, he's 54.8% owned. But if you're familiar with fantasy over the last couple of years, that's a very low ownership percentage for Ricky Rubio. And a lot of it has to do with him not starting off so great at the beginning of the season. He did have a slow start. Tyus Jones was dipping into his minutes, and Tyus Jones never seemed like he would take over the role completely, but it looked like Thibodeau was trying to just trying to get Rubio a reality check as far as his playing time and what he was doing with it. He started becoming complacent and wasn't really producing much. His field goal percentage was whack, and he's never been a great shooter. But as far as facilitating the team, he wasn't even doing that. And I think he was only averaging like 6. He was on pace to only average 6.3 average assists per game, and the lowest assists per game average he's ever had in his career was around 7.5. So. Maybe Thibodeau is throwing in Tyus Jones in there just to kind of, freak Rubio out a little bit, to maybe wake him up and have him snap out of it and run the show like he's supposed to. But let's talk about what he's been doing recently. He's been averaging 17.2 fantasy points over his last 5 games. He's averaged 8.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 8.2 assists, 1.6 steals, in 34.6 minutes in his last 5 games. So the 8.8 points, the 8.2 assists looks real good. Then you throw in those 4.5 rebounds and the 1.5 steals. That's a good all around stat averages. That's a good all around production line, and he can definitely help your team out, especially if you're having some point guard issues. Maybe you lost Mike Conley and you're not sure how quick Mike Conley is gonna come back and whether he's gonna produce the way he has. Scoop up Rubio, man. He's only owned in half of the leagues, which is still it's slightly above the 50% tier that I try to stay under. But I made an exception for this case because. Ricky Rubio needs to be added. He's been balling. He's been dropping dimes, and it seems like he's gotten that monkey off his back and has been doing well. Has been running the show well. He's got legitimate scorers around him to facilitate to, in Karl Anthony Towns, of course. He's got Wiggins. He's got Levine. All young guys that are capable of knocking shots down and finishing. Passes to the rim. So I mean, he's got the cast to be able to keep up these assist numbers. So I don't see why he couldn't keep this up since he's gotten that monkey off his back from the beginning of the season. So if you need point guard help, Ricky Rubio is a great look. Scoop him up. He's only owned in half of the leagues. I think he's a great pickup. He already got picked up in my league. I wanted to pick him up, but, I realized it too late. Somebody beat me to it. Next guy on the list is probably somebody you don't expect. He's an old vet, but his name is Luol Deng, small forward for the Los Angeles Lakers. Luol Deng is an old school vet. He throughout his career, he's been known to score points, get you some rebounds, and defend. He's a good wing defender, has always been a good wing defender. He is getting up there in age, but right now he is hot. He's hot, and he's more of a plug and play while he's hot right now, especially for the small forward position. It's so scarce. He's not somebody that I see having long-term value, but if you have a small forward injury right now, or you have a shitty schedule for your small forward position, Luol Deng somebody to plug and play while he's hot, because he's averaging 17.4 fantasy points over his last 7 games, and that's not that's 7 games is a good good chunk of time. And something to a good stretch to judge his production off of, and he's been doing that for 7 games. That's pretty impressive. Pretty much the whole month of December, he's been producing. He's averaged 12.5 points, 7 rebounds, 2.1 assists, almost 1.5 steals, 32.4 minutes in the last 7 games. So he's playing 30 plus minutes as well, and it seems like Luke Walton has started him the last couple games, so scoop him up. I guess Luke is trying to get away from the young guys and maybe show them what a veteran can do, and just kind of giving Deng the green lights so he can lead by example, as opposed to maybe just talking to guys and coaching them behind the scenes or on the bench or whatnot. So, plug and play him, like I said, as long as he's hot. Larry Nance has been hurt. He's been banged up. Brandon Ingram's minutes have been decreasing. So, Luol Deng's a good play right now. I'm not saying he's a permanent roster spot, but he's a good roster, a good player to roster as of right now. Until, he either gets injured or Luke Walton starts giving some of the younger guys some shine again. But he is a small forward, and it's hard to find some value at that position sometimes, especially in deeper leagues. Next guy on my list is a guy that I got. I'm glad I got him. I'm going to have to be patient with him, but I'm glad I scooped him up. His name is Tyreke Evans, shooting guard, small forward for the New Orleans Pelicans. If you know anything about Tyreke Evans, you know that when he's healthy, he's a beast. He's one of the more versatile players in the NBA. He can play, last year he had the point guard tag, the shooting guard tag, and the small forward tag, just because he was playing all three positions and could, float around and adds that versatility to a lineup. This year he's only got the shooting guard, small forward tag. They change those sometimes, I guess, depending on the year and what position they're being listed at in the lineup. But regardless, he still has the shooting guard, small forward tag, so that's still good. He has a little versatility there as far as lineup manipulations. But he has career averages of 16 points, 7 points, 4.9 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and 1.3 steals. Like I said, he's a beast. And I think the key thing for me kind of really just going after him, as soon as I heard the news, I scooped him up, and I'm glad I did off the waiver wire, just because he's in the contract year. So his contract expires after this year, and he'll be motivated to produce. I mean, he would be dumb not to. And I know, if he's not healthy, there's not really much you can do. If you're not healthy, you really can't play. You're stuck to, you're bounded by what your body can do. But mentally, if he's healthy, I don't see why he wouldn't try to produce. It would only make sense for him to produce, so that way, come during the off season, he's got some leverage when it comes to talking contracts with the market, and he can say, look, this is what I did. If I'm healthy, I'm capable of putting up these kind of statistics and bringing this to the table. So. That's one of the main reasons I jumped on him so quickly in my league, and since he's been back, he has started out on a minutes restriction, which I kind of expected. But man, he's somebody that could potentially take me to the ship and win it all for me, just because he's got that type of pedigree as far as talent, and I think I think the Pelicans know that as well, and that's why they're bringing him back on a minutes restriction, because they're trying to take care of their player and their talent. They're not trying to force him to come back and just re-injure himself again by trying to do too much too soon. So yeah, man, if Tyreke Evans is still on your roster, on your waiver wire, and you have the team that can give you're not necessarily losing a roster spot, because he is getting minutes, but you're not going to get great fantasy production from him yet. So you'll still get a couple points, but don't expect some big 20 point, 30 point, 40 point fantasy point outburst until he starts getting some minutes under his belt. So I went after him, scooped him up. He's only 39.6% owned. So if you feel confident enough in your team to take a guy like this and have him on your bench or plug him into your roster knowing that he's not going to give you great fantasy production, then by all means, I would suggest doing it. I'm above 500. I think I'm 3 games above 500 in our league. I'm either second or third. So I got a little cushion there for losses. It's still real early in the season, to be able to kind of sit on a player like this and feel him out and hopefully get a return from my patience of rostering Tyreke Evans. But yeah, he's the last guy on my Adam low-key balling segment. Scoop these guys up, man. They'll help your team out. And if you had an injury, this is the way you beat injuries. I lost Capella, so I went and I added Gary Harris and I added Tyreke Evans. I had Jeremy Lin, and Jeremy Lin has came back and his minutes have started increasing. So this is all working the waiver wire and using them 7 acquisitions to your advantage. So next we're gonna get into the court vision watch 'em segment. And first guy I'm gonna suggest you keep an eye on is JJ Barea, point guard for the Dallas Mavericks. So kind of like Tyreke Evans, he's back from an injury. He's on a minutes restriction. Just keep an eye on him because Darren Williams was on my Adam segment last week, and Darren Williams has been playing ball, has been hooping. But if Williams gets hurt or he gets banged up or they start resting him, and JJ Barea still starts getting his feet, his lungs under him, and starts getting his feet wet with the tempo and coming back, starts getting more minutes. More importantly, he's gonna be a great add, because if Darren Williams were to get hurt, I think Carlisle will hand the keys over to JJ Barea to run the offense, because I don't think he's gonna. I don't think Seth Curry is more capable. I don't think the rookie Jonathan Gibson is capable of doing that. And man, at the beginning of the season, JJ Barea was having the best start to a season in his career. He was averaging 16.3 points, 5.4 assists, 3.4 rebounds, and 33.1 minutes before injury. And he was coming, even when Darren Williams was starting, he would come off the bench and give that offensive, that offensive punch off the bench. He was that. He was kind of the leader of the second unit. And he's a little rascal, man. He's a little rascal that knows how to score and get under your skin. And he was producing great until he had that calf injury. And, I honestly think that the Mavs would probably not be in last place if it wasn't for that, because they were really relying on him a lot, and he was producing well. So keep an eye on him. I wouldn't roster him yet, just because he's not Tyreke Evans. They're kind of in the same situation where they're coming back, but he doesn't have the pedigree of talent that a Tyreke Evans has. So that's why I wouldn't have him in the Adam segment, where he's somebody that you have to add because he's somebody that could potentially be a top 5 player on your team. I don't think JJ Barea will be a top 5 player on your team, but he could potentially be a permanent rostered player on your team, and give you some great value for stealing him off the waiver wire. So just keep an eye on him. Watch the minutes. If his minutes start going up and he starts cutting into Darren Williams' minutes, or even if he just starts coming off the bench and playing in the backcourt alongside Darren Williams, and he starts putting up numbers, then don't hesitate to add him, because he was already getting buckets at the beginning of the season when he started off. And a little bit of that had to do with Darren Williams being out, but, like I said, Darren Williams is often injured. So if he gets hurt, JJ Barea is going to have the green light. And if he can do what he was doing at the beginning of the season, he's going to be a great addition to someone's team. He's only 14.8% owned, so he should be available. If you feel good about the guy and you want to stash him in your lineup, then go ahead and do so. I'm just going to keep an eye on him for now, just because, like I said, for me, he's not an automatic add as opposed to Tyreke Evans, and that has to do with the talent and the pedigree of talent that they carry and differentiate in. So don't add. Watch JJ Barea. Keep an eye on him. If his minutes start coming up, then definitely add him and treat him as a target. Next guy on the list is plays for the Rockets, and his name is Montrezl Harrell, power forward for the Houston Rockets. So this is the guy that I'm including in the watch him segment, but you just have to watch the situation as a whole. And Clint Capella's out for 6 to 8 weeks. Nene is been named the starter, but Nene's a veteran, and they kind of they watch his minutes closely, and they don't play him heavy minutes just because I feel like they're trying to preserve the veteran for the long haul and the long season. We don't want to lose him too early in the season. We want to have him available in the playoffs just for his IQ and his experience. So D'Antoni's doing the smart thing of watching his minutes and not playing him heavy minutes, just to kind of lower the risk of injury, which I think is smart. So I was a Capella owner. I had to make the decision of taking Harrell or Nene. I went with Harrell, with Montrez, just because he's shown a lot of potential when he does get minutes, and he's one of the better producers, per minute. He's one of the better fantasy producers in the league on a per minute basis. Problem is, he doesn't get a lot of minutes. With Capella being out now, he's going to have that opportunity, and his minutes are definitely going to increase. I don't know if he's going to get more minutes than Nene. I think he will, just because they'll rest Nene and monitor his minutes, like I said. But just watch the situation as a whole, because they may play Ryan Anderson at the 5 and play a super small lineup, or they may give Decker some extra minutes. I know they just called I forget the guy's name, Onwuake, back from the Red Vipers. They just called him up, and I probably just butchered the hell out of his name. But I doubt they'll give that guy some minutes. That's probably just a safety blanket in case there's an injury to one of our other bigs. But keeping on the situation, I took Harrell just because, I felt like he was a safer bet. Nene I think Nene is a more experienced player, of course, and he has the better IQ, but Harrell has the better motor. He makes hustle plays all the time. He's an active rebounder, and unlike Nene, off of that pick and roll, Harrell can sky up for that lob and dunk the ball off of a Harden alley-oop pass. And Nene, when Nene's in there, that option isn't there. Like, Harden's either has to, bounce past it through a tight window, so that way Nene can catch it and lay it up, because Nene is not skying and dunking the ball like the way Capella and Harrell can. So I went with Harrell, but there might not be much added value to Harrell, depending on the direction that D'Antoni goes. He might just plug in Ryan Anderson. So Definitely somebody to watch if Harrell starts becoming the consistent minute, receiver due to the coach's decision. If D'Antoni starts rolling with him, then scoop him up, because he's gonna start giving you some fantasy production similar to what Capella was giving you before that. And for my Capella owners, me personally, I didn't keep Capella. I dropped him. 6 to 8 weeks is a long time for a player of Capella's talent. He was already kind of shifting minutes, trading out minutes with Harrell and Nene in kind of a three-headed monster type of rotation. So he was producing great and was beasting for a stretch. And I was stressing that he was a must add, but then recently, before he got injured, it started becoming a three-headed monster type of rotation with him, Nene, and Harrell. And just for that fact alone, he wasn't somebody that I held on to, because I felt like D'Antoni wasn't sold on just giving Capella that making Capella the main guy for that role in the team's first unit. So that's part of the reason why I dropped Capella, and I just didn't want to hold on to him for 6 to 8 weeks because of that. So if you're a Capella owner, I would suggest you drop him. I wouldn't hold on to him for that long. It might end up hurting you, and I think for me it's a smarter move. But look for Harrell. If his minutes start going up, definitely add him. He's only 2% owned, so 98% of the leagues out there, he's available. And scoop him up if his minutes go up. Next guy on my list, we're done with the watch him segment. Now we're at the bench warmer and drop him segment, and I only got one player to talk about. I did some digging, try to find players who were over-owned, but I guess fantasy basketball owners and participants are smart. They're not holding on to guys. But one guy that I did see that had a pretty high ownership, above the 50% ownership, who I believe is over-owned. I only found one, and his name is Sean Kilpatrick, shooting guard, point guard for the Nets. So Sean Kilpatrick was great. Jeremy Lin was out. Kilpatrick was beasting. He was doing his thing, and if you had him, you had him long term. But you can't get attached to players. That's part of fantasy. Don't fall in love with these guys. Don't fall in love with what they're doing. You got to be smart about the team and where they're going and where they're headed. And Jeremy Lin is back, man. He's back in the rotation. He was on a minutes restriction, but his minutes are trending upwards. And Sean Kilpatrick's minutes are decreasing. They're trending downwards. In the last 4 games, he went from 31 minutes to 27 minutes to 26 minutes to 23 minutes this last recent game. So obviously, there's some changes going on there. Lin is back in the fold and has had some decent games since being back. So what I'm getting at here with Kilpatrick is still a potential waiver wire ad and a plug and play guy if you need to find somebody to play for that day. But he's no longer a permanent player to be rostered on your team. He doesn't carry that value anymore because he's not gonna have that type of production. So what I always stress is if you have players that you are not dropping and are rostered, permanently on your team, that are giving you the same production as players on the waiver wire, then you shouldn't consider that player a permanently rostered type of player for your team. You shouldn't label him as that. You should label him as a what I like to say, a plug and play guy. Somebody you just pull from the waiver wire. You play them for a couple days. You play them for that week because they have a great schedule, and then you drop them. Unless something happens, unless there's a change in coaching, unless it's a player that gets bumped into the starting lineup that typically comes off the bench. So Sean Kilpatrick's still a great plug and play guy. He's just not somebody who should be permanently rostered on your team. He's 60.3% owned, so I think people are still kind of holding on to him to see if he's gonna be able to produce with Jeremy Lin back. But the way it looks right now and the way it seems to be trending is that that's not going to be the case. So drop Sean Kilpatrick, because if you're holding on to him, he's the last 4 or 5 games he hasn't really produced well for you. And there's definitely other guys like a Gary Harris that you could pick up instead of him, or a Tyreke Evans if you want to have that patience and take him as opposed to having Sean Kilpatrick rostered and can potentially pay off even more. So that's all I got for this video, and that's all I got for the drop 'em segment. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Still a long season, still a lot of games left, still a lot of weeks left. Holidays are coming up. There'll be some good Christmas games going on. And happy holidays everybody out there. Appreciate you guys tuning in.